Hey everybody, welcome to Slash Bash, where today I am bringing you another Choosing Beggar Reddit video. If you are new to the channel, then subscribe and click on notifications so you don't miss out on the fun. In our first story, a Choosing Beggar brother wipes out his parents' retirement fund. Let's jump right in. My older brother was always spoilt by my parents, not because they wanted to treat him special, but because I was always the quiet one and never spoke up when I wanted something. This would almost always result in us getting or doing whatever my brother wanted. Unfortunately, this gave him a sense of entitlement a mile wide. When he was a teenager, he had some struggles with mental health. These were absolutely legitimate and made everyday life debilitating for him for years. My parents wanted the absolute best for him, and so they paid for private psychiatrists and psychologists, the best they could find. I'm not American, so we have a public system with the option of private care if you can or wish to pay. My dad had a good job, and at this time in our lives, money was not a huge concern. This seemed to be helping. And around the time when I was set to go off to university in a different city, my brother, with the support of his care team, decided to start his tertiary education at the same time in the same city as me. There was no university in my hometown, and several of the best universities in my country are all in one big city. This made the living arrangements for my parents much simpler as they helped pay for our rent. We flatted together, and we paid for everything else. They agreed to support us through university, and then we'd be on our own. My brother had a small episode on the day that he was set to start his classes and didn't go. This resulted in him being removed from his program. It was a compulsory first day. He could try again at the start of the next semester halfway through the year. A major setback, but hardly limiting. The logical thing would be for him to move back home until he could start again. His student loans stopped once he was removed from the program, so he had no money to live away from home, and I should get a flatmate for the place I was staying. My brother didn't like this idea. I should note that my brother hated living at home. He thought our house was too small, and our neighborhood was too poor looking. We were a middle-class family who lived in a nice house that my dad built. It just happened to be in a low-income area because when he built it, he was not as financially secure as he was later in life. It was an awesome neighborhood with a good sense of community, and I loved it there. But again, my brother had a huge sense of entitlement and thought he deserved to live somewhere better. Next thing I know, the new psychologist he is seeing in our new city has written a letter to my parents saying that an opportunity to immerse himself in this new city will allow him to more easily transition to study. Oh, and he was not well enough to work either. He should focus on getting used to his new surroundings. My parents, wanting what is best for my brother, allow him to stay living with me and gave him an allowance which is equal to what his student loans would have given him. Great, so everyone is happy, right? Not my entitled brother. The allowance he was getting wasn't enough for him. You see, he wasn't a student, so he didn't feel like he had to live a student lifestyle. He wanted to eat steak and lamb for dinner. He wanted new clothes every few weeks, a new iPhone when it came out, a new MacBook because his was slow. Again, my parents decided to give him some new goodies every now and then to keep him happy, and they also upped his allowance again. After a few months, he was getting more than twice as much per week as a student loan would give, and because I was buying groceries most weeks, he had almost no ongoing expenses once utilities were paid. Second semester rolls around and my brother hasn't even bothered enrolling. His psychologist, who he sees weekly by the way, again out of my parents' pocket, wrote another letter and things dragged on again and again. Fast forward 3 years and I am getting set to graduate, while my brother is still not working or studying while living in an apartment paid for by my parents. I get a decent job in my field at the university I studied at, and so keep living in the apartment, except now I pay for half the rent as well as half of the other expenses. By this point, my parents are just paying for my brother's half of the bills directly, while still giving him an allowance that was close to my salary. I have been getting increasingly annoyed by this, as my parents don't want him living on his own due to his illness, but he is refusing to come home with the support of his psychologist. I suggest sending him for a second opinion, but he again refused, and my parents respect his wishes. This is where it really gets wild. After I had been working for about a year and a half, our landlord decides that he wants to sell our apartment. Okay, this happens. We start looking around for a new place. My brother goes completely off the entitlement deep end when we are apartment hunting. He refused to look at anything that wasn't well outside of our given budget. Anything inside of our budget is too small, or too old, or too dark, or too ugly. He wants a modern new apartment in the heart of the city in one of the most expensive suburbs. The psychologist writes another letter outlining the importance of a comfortable environment for him. My parents cave, but I can't afford half of the new rent. They compromise with me and I only have to pay the same rent as I was before, which is barely a third of the rent at the new place, mind you. I wanted to get my own place at this point. I'm mid-20s with a serious girlfriend who I intend to marry one day. I want to start my own life without my brother attached, but my parents beg me to stay for just 1 year. It's a beautiful apartment, and I can still save while staying there, so heck, why not? I wasn't happy, but I could live with it. Unfortunately, my brother is now used to getting everything he wants or needs. He starts asking me to pay for more and more of the groceries. Idiot me, thinking that mom and dad had cut down on his allowance now that the rent is so expensive, I agreed to take some of the slack. Big mistake. They were still giving him the same amount, he just wanted more. He starts asking me for more and more things and then whines to mom when I don't give it to him. My parents cave over and over again and get him whatever he wants. New computer, new MacBook, new iPhone, heck, even a car. Up until this point, my parents could afford everything, especially with me helping out where I can. I was still saving for a house. I wasn't willing to throw away my future for my brother's present comfort. My dad had a good job and they were saving well for retirement. They were honest with me about their finances, as I would eventually be the one who got power of attorney when the time came. My mom is a pragmatic woman about that sort of thing, even if she has trouble saying no to my brother. But then, my dad stopped getting paid. He has an unusual job and works in a remote location away from home. And while he was stationed away, the company he was working for just vanished, with the owner leaving the country. Now, he can't leave his post until he is relieved. It was an important job and there were legal ramifications for leaving his post unattended, so he was stuck there with no pay coming in. This resulted in him essentially losing his job and going months without being able to look for new work. Really messed him up for a while. He was only a few years away from retirement, so he decided it was time to kick back and enjoy life. My brother lost his mind. He raged for days on end that dad betrayed him by not continuing to work. He would yell at mom over the phone, saying that they had better keep supporting him because he deserves the lifestyle that he has earned, whatever that means. I remember him saying that very vividly because I laughed my butt off at it, which turned into a huge fight. Knowing that my parents couldn't afford that rent without dad working, I decided to move into my own place to try and force a resolution. I end up finding a nice place of my own that my girlfriend and I move into. My brother, however, refuses to leave. He again gets a psychologist's letter to try and convince my parents to let him stay. He even has his boyfriend, really nice guy, but is a struggling artist working on commission, offer to move in with him. Next thing I know, he is still living in the ridiculously expensive apartment with his boyfriend, struggling to help cover when he is able. I move on with my life, fall mostly out of contact with my brother, and start my own adult life properly. I get married and settle down. 5 years go by, and when I am visiting my parents one day, my mom breaks down. It turns out that my brother had spent the next several years after I moved out refusing to reduce his spending or get a job or move home or anything. He would constantly blackmail my parents, saying that they would make their son homeless if they didn't give him free money. He had been doing that for years without my knowledge, and my parents didn't know what to do. His very expensive medical team was condoning his behavior. My parents had burned through almost 2 decades worth of their retirement savings trying to support my out-of-control brother. I decide to visit the psychologist myself, only to find out she is one of those tell people what they want to hear so they keep giving me money, predatory type psychologists who was enabling my brother because he was a cash cow for her. Our entire family was furious. Turns out my brother had been recovered since his first year living away from home. He was perfectly able to work or study, he just didn't want to, and so she wrote him those bogus letters to let him get away with it. He decided to milk my parents of their savings to fund his lifestyle because he had earned it. When confronted about it, he was entirely unapologetic. Now, he has been completely cut off. He works for a retailer and complains about my parents' lack of respect for him on Facebook every few days. I do not want to take away the legitimate mental health issues that my brother had. He just chose to willfully deceive everyone about the severity in order to demand that everyone else give him the life he feels he deserves. And no, his mental illness would have in no way contributed to that attitude. It was not that sort of illness. He's just an entitled idiot. My parents cut off my brother about 4 years ago now. I cut him out of my life several years before then. Emotional blackmail or not, there was a line that my parents should never have crossed for him. They regret it, but will survive. My parents both still work part-time despite being past retirement age now. They aren't in a dire situation, they are just working to try and stretch what's left as much as possible. But in maybe 10 years or so, it's probable that I will have to help support them. They used to have enough to retire comfortably and still have a sizable inheritance for us, but not anymore. Dad is the one who was hit the most. He grew up dirt poor and worked his butt off to provide for a good life for us. Now the majority of what he worked for is gone. My dad doesn't want me to have to help them, but they're my parents, and fortunately, I am well off enough to be able to. This has been John from Slash Bash. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed the video and want to see more of them, then hit that subscribe button. We'd love for you to drop a like, share it with your friends, and we will see you in the next one.